Beautiful song. I love that song. I thought you were leaving. And you don't even know the topic, I thought you were leaving. I don't get to watch much television these days for all sorts of reasons. One is because I try to be in bed with the kids, you know, so I don't get the nighttime television or anything like that. But there's occasionally a show that I key on. Some of it is, I would call, good television. Some of it is brainless pastime television. And occasionally, I accident across something that I think is absolutely brilliant. Now, you may not agree with my taste, but I'm going to refer to the show today, and if you've ever seen it, I really hope you'll agree that this is one of the most brilliant shows presently on. I'm embarrassed to say, even though I wrote this down, I can't remember whether it's on Life or Slice. I think it's Life. Have any of you seen or heard of the show Till Death Do Us Part? Yeah, you're nodding up and down. One person, is that it? Nobody else? Yeah, okay, yes, yes. Who else? Anybody else? Art? Good. Mirth. You know, Till Death Do Us Part. I love that show. And I fell in love with it the first time I saw it. Now, I hope I get her name right. I always mess it up. You know, I really should, one of these days, put some notes in front of me. Gail Vaz-Oxlade. She's a financial advisor, financial counselor, and she is absolutely brilliant. Okay, so the show starts out like this. It looks like, I think it is a bus stop, waiting at a bus stop. And you know how bus stops have all these pictures of things, you know, usually that you can buy, spend your money on? Well, this particular picture is of her holding her very professional looking briefcase, and there's a voice-over talking about what's going to be happening in the show. And it says some things about finances, and how people manage their finances and the trouble they can get themselves in. She identifies herself and identifies a couple that she is going to be spending a bunch of time with. I think it's about a month, and she's going to present them with challenges in order to get their finances on track, because they have made a catastrophic mess of their finances. She says one line in there that was the first line to hook me on the show, from which point on I was addicted, and it was this: finances are the chief reason for couples splitting up. She is so right. I've said this in sermons over the years, that, you know, people think that it's the big sins, which I don't have to name. You all know what they are, right? That could be for another sermon. You're smiling, so you know the sins I'm talking about. They're the fun ones that get you into trouble. She talks about finances being the chief reason for couples splitting up. When I do marriage prep, I've got my list of 10 questions, and marriage prep is about dealing with not just yes-no answers, but the process of responding to the issues raised by my 10 questions. And one of my questions is about what do you folks who are planning on spending the rest of your lives together think is the chief reason couples break up? They come up with some very weird and wacky things sometimes, but there's the greatest hits. There's the gold, silver, and bronze medal of what they think, and they're virtually always wrong. Believe it or not, in-laws gets the silver medal. Adultery gets the first medal, and there's a couple of others that get like the bronze medal. But the reality is, it is finances. Finances, when they're not in order, can put such an incredible strain on a relationship, etc., 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 that the relationship implodes. So when she sort of materialized out of this, Gail Vaz-Oxlade materialized out of this sort of poster in a bus stop, with a briefcase, and said she was going to straighten these people out because finances are the chief reason, main reason for couples to split up, I was hooked from then on, and I wanted to hear what she had to say. And so she appears at the home of the particular couple, and I don't know how you get on the show. I don't think I'd want to be on the show, but these couples want to be on the show, and she comes in as a financial advisor and consultant. The first thing she does, and this takes skill and brains and guts more than anything else, she does an analysis of their finances. She sees, as best she can, to determine where their money is going And we're not talking necessarily about people earning 30, 40, 50,000 a year. Sometimes we're talking about people earning significantly into the 6 figures. And she puts all this stuff out on, in effect, a spreadsheet, totals it up, and most couples, in fact, I wouldn't go so far as to say every couple that I've seen the show on so far, thinks it's at one point, she points out to one level, she points out to them that it's significantly more the debt that they think they have. And then she says, if you keep on like this, in 5 years, you will owe $720,000 or $340,000 or whatever the amount is. They think that they've got a little bit of trouble and they're in $30,000, $40,000 in debt, and she points out to them that it's a lot worse than that, and if it keeps on going in this way, they are toast. Okay, that's the word they'll use during the sermon. Her language, I really appreciate her language too. It's very straight and very confrontational. And you just watch the couple. You watch their faces fall. Some, you can see tears gather in their eyes, and of course, because it's a television show, it's good television, camera's right there, tears. Some people laugh in a sort of embarrassed way, because it is embarrassing. You know, to have it pointed out that you spend $3,000 a month cash that you have no records for. I would like to have $3,000. Anyway, that's a poor beat, but anyway, forget that. And she's there, and what she does then is she asks them if they will do whatever it takes to get their finances in order. By this time, she has turned them into little worms or pools of jelly on the floor. That might be my interpretation of how I would feel in that circumstance, but nonetheless, she's really sold them on the fact that, you know, they are really in more trouble than they thought, and it's going to take serious work to get them out of the hole that they've dug for themselves, and she asks them if they're willing to do anything. And I guess if a couple said, no way, it wouldn't make it to television, the show's over right there. So the couple says yes, and she says, okay, first thing, bring him. And she always says it, bring him. Or says different words, but there's always this action. She wants all their credit cards and debit cards. And they are going to learn to live on cash for a month, and hopefully the patterns of behavior that are instilled. I'm taking some time to do this because I'm hoping 2 things. One, by saying something about the methodology, maybe somebody is going, but I really hope, especially since so few of you know the show, that you watch it. I really, really hope that some of you decide to look it up and tune into it, because it really is powerful. And so they give her their credit cards and debit cards, and she disposes of them or hides them or takes them or does various things. I saw once she put them in a blender, you know. That's a bit of like extreme financial management. But, and then she gives them some jars. Now some of these people have been used to spending, now I'm making up these numbers and not referring to any specific show, but let's say they've been used to spending $3,000 or $4,000 a month, of which they're only earning $2,500 to $3,000 a month. So you can just see the way things are going, right? And taking out a line of credit to pay off the credit card, and then a new credit card to pay off the line of credit, it's amazing what people can do. And so she's there, and she brings their level of spending down, and it's always amazing to watch the look on people's face when she says, I am cutting your discretionary spending by 76%. You know, how could we possibly? People are spending $600 to $700 a month on restaurants, and $300 on personal grooming, and $400 in the electronics store, and all the rest of that. She's cutting it down. You have $125 a week for food. You have and $25 a week for entertainment and gifts. $30 a week for personal grooming and clothes. And people are there, how could we possibly do this? And then she sets them a series of challenges. And there's a lot of challenges that she does. I find them absolutely brilliant, you know. And I think, frankly, all of us, no matter what our financial position, would, you know, not do too badly necessarily to just say, I think we should just try that challenge and see how we handle it. At the end of the show, there's an incentive, right? You know, every parent knows you raise children by incentives and consequences. That's the way it is. The incentive is, if the couple meet the challenges to her standard, they will get up to $5,000 at the end of the show to help them pay down their debt. If they don't, the amount will be reduced proportionally. So everybody wants to get the $5,000. There's a big incentive. They've also realized that they're in a mess from down. Are you making any connections here spiritually? You know, that somehow we could sort of toot through life as if everything's fine. Because life teaches us to avoid reality checks. You know, there is absolutely no advertiser that will say, come and spend your money on this product, but first check and see if you can afford it. Okay? So we're talking reality checks here. Okay. So she does these challenges, and probably for all of us, we could use a reality check every now and then. There's skill testing questions. The challenges are failed or succeeded at with varying degrees. But most often at the end of the show, people get some amount of money. Usually, and maybe I'm wrong from a purely numerical point of view, but it seems to me that usually they get the full 5,000. Occasionally she'll knock off 1,000, occasionally knock off 2,000. But generally the people do fairly well. I only remember one show where a guy didn't get anything because, do you remember that one too? You nodding that? Wasn't that guy a jerk? Total jerk. Like, I can't believe it. You know, he actually said, I'm always right. I don't know what to say more about that. Like, I hope you see that on a rerun, but be that as it may. This guy, like, slap. Anyway, and you should see the faces that she made at him at some point. Like, it was funny, but it was too believable to be unbelievable. Anyway, so they meet the challenges. Here's my question. And I don't know if Gail Vaz-Oxlade will ever see this on YouTube. But if she does, I want to take her out for lunch. She can pay because she's got more money than me probably. But I want to take her out, I want to go to lunch with her. And I would even go to Toronto if that's where, because I want to sit across a table from her, look her square in the eye, and say to her that I love her show. I love the premises. I love the way she does the show. I think it is fantastic. I think it should be mandatory in marriage preparation that people see at least a half a dozen episodes of this until they get it. And then I would ask her, but how come I've never seen, maybe I'm mistaken, maybe I've just missed it, but I don't think so. How come I've never seen one of those little jars with anything for charitable donations? I've never seen that. I've never seen that. And here's what I'd like to, I was going to say suggest, that's my normal polite language. I don't want to suggest it, I want to say it. That if you're into it for you, and only you, you will be virtually guaranteed to mess up financially. But if it is programmed into your heart, mind, soul, and spirit that part of your responsibility is for other people, as well as yourself and your family and all those good things, then I would suggest that not only will you give well to charity, but that your own personal finances will be in a greater order, in better order as well. That's what I'd like to suggest. Now, there are other things on her show, which, as I say, this isn't trash talking because I think it's absolutely brilliant what she's done. She has suggested, occasionally, that maybe people, they just can't afford the house they're living in, and that they've got to sell it, and buy something that is more in keeping with what their real financial situation is. Sometimes that happens. But what I would like to say is, perhaps we should never have bought that house in the first place. That perhaps if our finances were in order going in, we wouldn't have bought that house. We would have been more balanced. Maybe, if our charitable giving was where it is, we would look at that for sale sign and we might say, If only I wasn't giving $8,000 a year to charities, I could afford that house. But I am committed to doing what I can to, forget the shorthand, deal with the human condition, and not just my own condition. And so instead of buying that house, I will buy a smaller house. Maybe we're getting at a point where you just don't need the Mercedes. Nothing wrong with Mercedes, I'm not trashing Mercedes, does anybody grab a Mercedes? If you can afford it, great. And if your finances are online, great. And if you're balanced, great. And if you're giving to charitable organizations, and I'm not just talking to church here, fantastic. But maybe I should use a name of a particular brand, because maybe most of us, all of us, some of us, even if it's not a Merc or a Beamer, maybe we could be driving something a little smaller, a little cheaper, a little better on gas. And isn't it amazing when you do that, that all of a sudden, you're not just talking financial responsibility and stewardship, but when you start speaking that language, you're also, as well, speaking of environmental stewardship. When I put this sermon together at the beginning, this was a digression. But the more I thought about it, the less of a digression and the more integral it began to appear to me. You know, can I say something that is at risk of insulting your intelligence, but instead just boomerang it and say I'm insulting my own intelligence? The bigger the house you have, the more expensive it is to operate. Right? Please do not hear me say that we should all sell our houses and go and live in a tent at Voyager Provincial Park. You want to do that, God bless you. Invite me for supper, but I'm going home to a warm house at the end of the night. Okay? But I do wonder where our thinking is sometimes. The bigger the house, the more electricity you're going to use. The bigger the house, the more your fixed costs are going to be. Your taxes, your water tax, your insurance. The bigger the house, the more your maintenance is going to be. The bigger the house, the more stuff you're going to have to buy to fill it. And I'm just raising this, okay? Because obviously this is issues that every one of us have to face individually. And while I am totally against a prosperity gospel, and you all know what that is, eh? You know, if you get your faith right, if you get your spirituality right, God will bless you with wealth, health, and happiness. You know, there is no equation there. Anybody who makes that, they're steering you really wrong. But I do not believe that God wants us to suffer necessarily and all live in a cardboard shack. So I'm not saying here is the standard of house that we should all own, and if you're not in this standard, then you're not a Christian. I'm not doing that. But what I'm suggesting is for all of us, this is something that we need to look at. And I'm further suggesting that one of the things that raises that question is when we get our attitude towards charitable giving in order. Does that make sense? It is biblical. It is biblical, by the way. The standard, and again, it's up to us to interpret how we live and apply the standard. The standard has always been bring the first 10% to God. God is a lousy businessman. He really, really is. He says, just give me the 10%, and you could keep 90. Supposed to be, and think of that. So the idea is 10% off the top. That leaves 90% for everything else. The mortgage, food, taxes, RRSPs. So let me ask a question here. If tomorrow your income was to be reduced by 10%, now I assume, and I don't want this to sound like a rant against y'all because, you know, some of the best givers here. But if your income was to be reduced by 10%, would you survive? Let me ask it in a different way. If your income was to be reduced by 10%, and I'm not saying this to be facetious or hyperbole, if your income was to be reduced by 10%, and I'm talking about your household income, okay? Would your lifestyle change at all? Because one of the things I've learned from Gail Vaz-Oxlade, I would say Vaz-Oxlade, is that most people's problem that gets them into trouble isn't that they don't have enough money. Because also at the end of the show, just before she gives that check, she says, if you keep up with this plan in 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, 3 years, it depends on how bad the mess they got themselves in, you will be paid off. And if you take the debt repayment money and put it into an RRSP, by the time you retire, you will be worth $1.2 million or $640,000 or whatever it is. You see, the problem isn't a financial problem, it's a management problem. And it's a priorities problem. And she's dedicated to getting the priorities right. And I wonder, for us, as people who call themselves followers of divine truth. So let me take it out of the realm of rhetorical and ask the question again. And I'm not going to, manipulate this or leave a 2-minute pause for reflection. But I really am going to ask you to think about it. If your gross household income was to be reduced by 10%, would you feel it? Would you feel it? Or would it just mean less of that money that goes, who knows where it goes, would be going, who knows where it went? Did that make sense the way I worded that in the English language? Would it be, I've got all sorts of phrases that spring to mind that really don't belong in sermons, okay, about how we blow that money. And we all do, really. Would your lifestyle change? Would you even notice, in any real way, a cut in 10%? And do you know what that means? If upon reflection, you say, well, no, it may be 1 less pizza a week, or it may be 1 less bottle of wine, maybe, I don't know. It may be waiting an extra year to get the new car, or the new computer, or whatever. I don't know, because I don't know how much I'll earn. Maybe even not, maybe not. But one way or another, at the lowest possible level, it means that all of us could do more. So let's say you look at it and you go, you know what, if we were to take a 10% cut in gross household income, then we would lose our house. Is it possible, and I'm not saying, by the way, write me the check, but is it possible that you're already living in a house you can't afford? Is it possible? If you can't take that cut, and you say, we wouldn't be able to run our cars. Is it possible you have too many cars? Or they're too big and too expensive? That something else is out of whack? Is that possible? Is it possible that if you can't take a little bit of a cut, what that means, folks, you've got no cushion. And you need a visit from Gail. Because you've got no cushion. And it means you're in trouble. It really does. It's just a question of how much trouble, not whether you're in trouble. But is it possible, from a spiritual point of view, taking it out of just fiscal, is it possible from a spiritual point of view, that if you couldn't take that cut, that God may be calling you to reorder your financial priorities at least a little bit? Now, I'm not saying that starting next week, you're only allowed to be a member of St. Mary's if you give 10% gross household income. That is not the way the Anglican Church works, though there are churches that will look at your tax form from the previous year and they will say, this is what you are going to give. There really are churches like that, and there are also churches that publish a list of who gives how much. Talk about guilting people into shaming into giving. That's not the way we operate. It never will be the way we operate. But is it possible that there's a spiritual call here? And that the call is to take a look at our lifestyle. and to say, you know what? For all sorts of reasons. For personal economic safety, we got to take a look at ways of spending our money. For global stewardship, because we have so much in global terms, we've got to take a look at things. And even when you consider it for ecological reasons, because maybe some of the change in lifestyle we may be being called to will have the added effect of making us better stewards of God's creation. I would love it if right in that space, 2 pews behind Cheryl, Gail Vaz-Oxlade was sitting here. I would love it if, I'd love it if she was sitting here smiling and saying, you know, he's got some good points. I'd love it too if she and I could just go at it hammer and tongs because she so disagreed with me. I would love to have that discussion. But on one thing, I know she and I would be 100% in sync. The thing is that money is the thing that jeopardizes relationships more than anything else, and the mismanagement of money. And isn't it strange that that happens in a society where we got more disposable income than at any other time in human history? We've also got more obesity, diabetes, alcoholism, tranquilizer addiction, than at any time in human history. Could there be a connection here? Maybe, maybe not. Up to you to do the math on that. But we would agree with that. That in a time where there's incredible wealth, there's also incredible mismanagement. And I suspect that if I was to suggest, you know, that as people get their financial package in order, that one of the things that needs to be a part of that order is thinking of other people. I suspect she may say yes. She may say, you know what, some are in such a mess that they would have to defer that for a while, or not give as much perhaps as they ought to, but they've gotten themselves in such a mess that they can't do it, because it would get them in more of a mess. But she may say, you know what, as part of the balancing out, she may say, because I don't know if she says, she may say, that's not such a bad idea. Getting people to think beyond themselves as part of their balancing out. And you know what? I hope we come out of this saying Lorne has a pretty high opinion of Gail Vaz-Oxlade, because I do. But you know what? God said it first. Get your house in order, and everything else follows. Now let's pray. God, in the times that we're living in, there are so many temptations to overspend, and kids aren't here, so stupid spend. So many ways in which we can really get ourselves in a big mess. So much temptation that instead of dealing with the real issues we should deal with, to just buy our way out of anxiety or depression or whatever. Now, there are so many ways that we can get ourselves in trouble. Open our hearts and our minds to practice good stewardship. Not to be ridiculous about it, but good and proper stewardship. And as we pray for ourselves, we pray for the world around us, for the poor, the lonely, the hungry, the marginalized, for all in need. And we pray for your church, for a faithful stewardship of our resources and of your planet. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.